Well, good morning, Bridgeway. It's great to be here with you today. I'm so excited to share this new sermon series on the thrill of hope. I want to welcome you here today. I also want to take a moment and welcome those who are joining us online. This is historic. This is our very first live stream sermon, and I couldn't be more excited, more nervous to join you on the internet as well today. So it's just good to be together. I want to say a couple things because I'm returning. I was gone last weekend, and I want to say just two things before I started the sermon. First off, I wanted to say a huge thank you to Dan Mack, who preached last weekend. Fantastic message. If you can put your hands together, thank Dan. So good. Great message. If you know anyone who's struggling or trying to work through anxiety, please check out that sermon on our podcast. Second thing I wanted to say is really has to do with what we're doing here, meeting in person. I've gotten some questions, and I've gotten some questions from people outside the church like, hey, why are you still meeting? Like, you're still meeting together. Isn't that not safe? Shouldn't you be, like just going virtual? And I wanted to address that just for a quick second because I've been in communication with almost every area pastor here in our town. And I want to say very clearly that not every congregation is the same. And so I care deeply about my role as your shepherd, caring for the people who are here. And one of the things I've learned, especially over these last several months, and especially with what happened in the spring, is that as a church, we're called to care for not just your spiritual well-being, but your entire person, like holistically, all that you are. And I think one of the lessons I really learned during the beginning of this pandemic when we shut down is people really struggled. They struggled with isolation and loneliness. And so for as long as we're able, I want to make a commitment to keep our in-person gatherings going. Now, that means that you've got options. We want to give you the option. If you feel comfortable joining us here, we'd love to have you. If you're not comfortable, then you are more than welcome to join us online, and we're so grateful that you're tuning in to be part of our live stream. But we want to have that option. We want to give you that choice. We're going to continue to do what I think are really the best practices in talking to other churches. We're cleaning, we're sanitizing between the services. We're asking you to, and you're doing a great job. You're keeping social distancing in mind. You're wearing, everyone's favorite, you're wearing a mask. I know. But thank you for doing that. And again, just want to continue to do what God calls us here in this place. And that really brings us to this topic of Christmas. I've been looking forward to talking about Christmas with you. Let me just ask you, quick show of hands, how many of you are you're just full of the Christmas spirit? Like, you're so excited. I'm seeing hands go up. A few hands go up, right? Like, yeah, Christmas spirit and Christmas songs and the season of Christmas. I got to tell you, just coming here, being here this morning and seeing all the decorations, I got to tell you, it just gets me in this Christmas spirit. Maybe some of you, your hands didn't go up so quick because you're kind of like maybe how a lot of people are right now. You're feeling a little unsure. Well, what's Christmas going to look like this year? I had someone describe to me, hey, I don't know, Pastor, I'm still kind of dealing with my Thanksgiving hangover. And I asked him, well, what do you mean by that? Well, Thanksgiving wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and didn't get to see family and friends. And I can imagine that some people are coming into Christmas with sort of those same sort of feelings, like what's it going to be like? And you might even be a little bit disappointed before Christmas has even gotten here. You might feel a little disappointed because we're still dealing with a pandemic. And we're still dealing with a negative news cycle. And we're still dealing with the election. Oh, isn't the election over by now? And maybe you're still dealing with really important things, like you've had health concerns this year. And it was hard this year because your favorite thing about the holidays is being together with family. And that was kind of, put on hold for Thanksgiving. And it's sort of up in the air for Christmas. Maybe you're disappointed this morning because the Lions are rebuilding again, right? Like new management, and you're like, it's just so depressing everywhere I turn. Maybe your life is sort of struggling. Maybe this year was a really tough year because you lost a loved one. And you're looking at these holidays thinking, how am I going to face these holidays without that special person? I think as a pastor, someone who cares for souls, I think it's really easy to diagnose that a lot of people today are struggling. And that's what I want to address in this series, A Thrill of Hope. Because a lot of the negative markers are up. I mean, depression is up, loneliness is up. In fact, I was reading this past week that 2020 has been a really good year for distilleries, for breweries, and for winemakers because alcohol consumption is way up. It's up like 55%. And it just shows how people are struggling. In fact, I might find that in the church, it's even maybe a different form of struggle. You might be here this morning, and you might say, honestly, Pastor, I'm frustrated with God. It's been such a tough year, and everywhere I turn, it just seems to get harder. In fact, I'm so frustrated with God. I mean, I can't even really tell people how I feel. And you go through life, and you kind of say the right thing. Someone says, hey, how you doing? And you're like, oh, I'm doing great, right? And it kind of becomes like the Christian water cooler, right? Like, how you doing, really? And you respond, oh, I'm great, and, God is great. And we struggle to be honest with how we're actually doing. I find it interesting how adults struggle to be honest, and yet most kids have no problem being honest and telling you how they really feel. In fact, I was looking at some letters that were written from the perspective of kids writing to God, Dear God letters. I thought some of them were really insightful, so I thought I'd share a few of them with you. The first one was from Nan. She says, Dear God, I bet it is very hard for you to love all of everybody in the whole world. There are only 4 people in our family, and I can never do it, right? Pretty honest kid. Next one is really good too, from Joyce. Dear God, thank you for the baby brother, but what I prayed for was a puppy, right? And then this one from Denise. Dear God, if we come back as something, please don't let me be Jennifer Horton, because I hate her, right? Denise kind of struggling in a few areas, reincarnation and loving the people around her. You might find that you're just frustrated. Now, I think there are so many things that are trying to steal our hope. So many circumstances, so many people even that are trying to steal our hope. And that's why I want to talk about the thrill of hope and the real message of Christmas. Because behind the message of Christmas is this promise of hope, and it's available to every single person. In fact, I want to start this series off by going way back. I want to look at one of the most famous and one of the oldest statements in the Bible that predicted that this Jesus would be born, that we celebrate at Christmas. And I want you to see how unusual this gift is, how hopeful this gift is through the lens of the prophet Isaiah. If you have your Bible this morning, I'd love for you to turn to Isaiah chapter 9. In fact, we're going to read verses this morning that are probably the most famous verses in all of the Bible that point to this moment. And I guarantee you're going to get to the end of these verses today, and you're going to recognize them. These are going to be, oh yeah, I know these verses, Pastor. But I want to do kind of the hard work of teaching through the context of this passage. And I want you to see how hopeless it looked for the people that were following God in that day. A little bit of background. Isaiah is written at a time and a place where he's trying to correct and encourage the people of God. The Israelites have gone through a fracture. Their own nation has been split in two. There's a northern kingdom and there's a southern kingdom. God's people aren't getting along with one another. To make matters worse, the north kingdom is being slowly conquered by an evil empire known as the Assyrians. And they're slowly just taking away everything from the northern kingdom. And Isaiah shows up on the scene with a really tough task. How do I keep these people on course and also encourage them to stay the path of following God? And he's writing to them 700 years before Jesus would be born. He's saying, as dark as your day looks now, you need to remain hopeful. Hope is coming. And he's pointing to this moment, to the Christmas narrative of Jesus being born. Let's read a little bit from Isaiah chapter 9, the first verse. It says, Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. Now, this is kind of an interesting verse. This is really good news. There will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. I mean, this might be one of those places that you just want to underline for one of those gloomy days in your life. There will be no more gloom. For those who are distressed, for those who are stressed out, hope is coming. But Isaiah says you have to look at hope through kind of this past future lens. Really unique the way he imagines this. He says, you first got to look at your past. And your past has not looked very good. In fact, he says, in the past, it was humbling in the land of Zebulun, in the land of Naphtali. Now, what you need to know about Zebulun and Naphtali is these are two bordering cities inside of Israel, but they're right on the northern edge of the northern kingdom. So basically what that means is Zebulun and Naphtali, they would have been the first to be conquered by Assyria. They would have been the first to be kind of like put under chains and oppressed. And the way this Assyrian army would come in was quite humbling. They would come in and they would round up all of the military, all of the warriors, and then they would go around and they would round up all of those who were like highly educated, high in the social standing. They would take anyone and everyone who's powerful and important, and they would say, okay, you are going to model what it means to worship our God. And the Assyrians worshiped this mythical sun god, and they would basically, to the point of death, require that they worship their God. And it would just be demoralizing to the people of God. They would just feel like, wow, if our strong warriors, wow, if our strong leaders, wow, if all these people in power can't stand under the threat of Assyria, then we might as well all just bow. And so this is the past. And he says, you have to look at your past, how humbling it's been, but you have to have the courage then to look into your future. And this is where it becomes kind of hard for them to understand, because he says your future looks totally different. He said, in fact, that your future, he, being God, will honor Galilee of all the nations. Now, they would have heard this and they would have been like, Galilee? There's nothing great about Galilee. Galilee is this podunk sort of fishing village. Nothing good comes out of Galilee. They would have had kind of that place on their map where they would have said, oh, that's a no-place sort of town. In fact, just think about it for yourself. What's that place on the map? Might be in Michigan, might be in another state, but you just know, like, that place, there is nothing going on. Like, there's just that place. I'm not going to say what that place is, because every time I've ever done that, someone is sitting here, and they're from that place. So I'll just tell you this. When I moved to Rockford, when I was in middle school, I was moved here in high school, I remember my mom saying to me, hey, Ron, we're moving to Rockford. And I'm like, oh, Rockford? What's that? Where's that even? And I went back to school the next day, and I started telling all my friends, hey, I'm moving to Rockford. Kind of weird, kind of strange. And all of my friends, every one of them was like, Rockford? That's like Hicktown. That's like in the country. Like, are you farming? I mean, what are you doing with your life? And my, how things have changed now, right? Well, that would have been Galilee. Galilee would have been considered just this kind of nowhere in the world. Nothing good could ever come out of Galilee. And Galilee becomes the place where Jesus is raised. And not only is Jesus raised there, but Jesus would begin his ministry in the Galilee region. And what would he do? He would call upon those uneducated fishermen, those societal weak people, and they would become the building block of his ministry. Maybe another way to think about hope is to think about this Jesus being born, and when it comes to hope, it's unexpected. Hope is completely unexpected. And this messes with us because we tend to associate sort of the unexpected things in life with sort of just bad things that are going to happen. And this is unexpected in a good way. But it doesn't look like that. In fact, everything about the birth of Jesus is unexpected. Not only does he come from Galilee, but he's born in a manger. And he's born kind of in this area, in this place in which Herod is ruling on the throne. Herod is in his palace, and yet this King Herod in the palace is looking down, trying to find where is this child that's going to be born king of the Jews. And this King Jesus isn't born in a palace. He's born in a stable, in a manger. In fact, really great writer Eugene Peterson, one of my favorites, he says, never forget that Jesus was born in the spit and slop of life. You think about that. They laid Jesus in a manger where animals ate their food. He wasn't given a royal robe. He wasn't given a royal place of life. It's unexpected. It's unexpected for Mary and Joseph. And Mary and Joseph, I mean, how much more unexpected could it get? A couple teenage kids, engaged. They're not married yet, but all of a sudden, Mary's pregnant, right? Like, that's pretty unexpected. I mean, it's unexpected now for teen pregnancy. And in that day, in that culture, kind of a culture of honor, a culture that really had a high moral standing, this would have been so shameful. And so it's not unexpected that Joseph would say, well, I'm going to divorce her quietly. Until what? Until he's visited unexpectedly in a dream by an angel. Again, just turn after turn, it's this unexpected way. I mean, this poor middle-class manger baby. And oh yeah, Herod isn't content. He goes on kind of this tirade of saying he's going to kill all of the children that are 2 and under. He's so angered by the thought of this hope that would burst onto the scene. Again, we think of hope, and we think that when it comes to unexpected things, that they're always bad things. And Isaiah is saying there's this unexpected hope that is going to far surpass your wildest dreams. Unexpected. I was reading this story about how this man, real true story, in Utah was hunting, and something unexpected happened. He was hunting with his very loyal dog, and he was in his boat, but he had to get out of his boat to retrieve his decoys, so he set his gun on the bow of the boat. And his dog, which normally just sits in the boat, did something unexpected. When he got into the water, the dog decided it wanted to get in the water too. So it jumped up on the bow of the boat, and it triggered the gun, shot the guy right in the behind. 27 pellets, bird shot. He got shot in the butt by his dog. I don't know, that could be like a metaphor for 2020, right? Like he was not expecting it. And I think that's how we view life. We think that it's just always going to be bad. Oh, if something unexpected is going to happen, it's probably something bad that I don't want to happen. And this is where Isaiah is saying, no. When it comes to this gift of hope, it is so exciting. And it's going to come to you in ways that you've never imagined. In fact, he picks up on this in the next verse, verse 2. He says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as a warrior rejoice when dividing the plunder. He gives this idea of kind of something is changing, and it's going to look completely different. This light that has dawned on the land of deep darkness. Actually, that word deep darkness, that phrase in the Hebrew is really a much darker reality. It's actually kind of this idea that the English language struggles with. It's actually trying to say that the people living in the land were, in the script it would say they were in a death shadow. Like they weren't just in deep darkness, like they were 1 foot in the grave. They were looking like the living dead, like just barely alive. They looked like shadows of themselves. And this hope breaks in, and it's a light that has dawned. And think about this. This is sort of a play on words that the prophet is singing this song over the people. And he's using these words, and it's kind of a play on words because I mentioned the Assyrians worshipped the sun. And Isaiah is saying here that there's a different sun that's coming. This sun is going to be a light that breaks in and takes you from death to life. Now, we need the sun. We need the physical sun. In fact, especially on days like today where it doesn't look like the sun's coming out. You have days like yesterday where it's like, the sun comes out. And even if it's for like 7 minutes, you're like, I want to see the sun. I mean, especially in Michigan, right? I mean, seasonal affective disorder. It's a real thing. I was reading this week, kind of nerding out on Popular Mechanic, and I was looking at an article that talked about kind of this doomsday view of what would happen if our sun went out. You know what would happen if our sun went out? First, it would get very cold. In fact, at the end of the first day, we'd be dealing with temperatures just in one 24-hour period of 100 degrees below. Now, you can actually survive in the right environment at that temperature. But by the end of the first year, it would sink to 400 degrees below zero. Not only that, all photosynthesis would stop. There'd be no oxygen. You would suffocate. And then third, and finally, is there'd be no vitamin D. And so not only would you lose your beautiful tan, but your bones would become brittle and crumble. From dust you came, to dust you will return. Merry Christmas. Thanks for being here today, friends. So good to share the hope of Christmas with you, right? And that's what he's saying here, is it's not just a metaphorical, not just a physical light, but there's a symbol of light that is going to come into your spiritual lives. In the New Testament, the writers in the New Testament would say that's the miracle of Christ in us. That's Christ that comes available to us, and it changes everything. See, I think a lot of times, and I'd even say as a pastor, especially around Christmas, people will come to church, and they'll even come to like these conversations about God and spiritual things, and they'll say that they need Jesus in their life. And they'll say things like, well, I need Jesus. And Jesus, if you get me out of this jam, Jesus, if you help me out of this situation, I'll never do that again. I promise I'll follow you with all of my heart. And they kind of treat Jesus as sort of just something that's in crisis mode, like a paramedic. And what Isaiah is saying to you today is that Jesus is not just some paramedic that rescues you from the crises of your life. That Jesus comes and he gives you a totally different life. And this begins to just breathe hope. This gives hope as if like a nation had its boundaries enlarged. He says as if a warrior actually got to enjoy the plunder and the spoils of his victory. As if a harvest came in and it was far more than you planned on. There is this hope. Maybe another way to think about this hope is it breaks through. Hope breaks through the darkness. It breaks through this grip of death and evil, and it becomes this absolute game changer, and it defeats all of the disappointments in your life. You know, one of the things I've been trying to do as just a person, I don't even want to say as a pastor, but just as a human being, is I've been trying to have more thoughtful conversations with people. And I'm always busy, and I'm always moving from one place to the next, but I'm really trying to slow down and have more thoughtful conversations. And I found like a really important topic because I think that what's missing is not connection. I mean, we're all connected. We can stay connected socially and on our phones and through Zoom, right? But I think what's been lost over the last several months is conversation. And you may want to try this. I've been kind of just asking people, and it's really gotten a lot of conversation going, is just tell me, like, what's maybe been the most disappointing thing you've gone through in 2020? And I tell you, it just kind of opens up just this floodgate for people of things that they're going through. And I've heard it all, in fact, and just asking, what's been the toughest part of 2020 for you? And you know, people, they want to share. They want to grow through these situations. And so, you know, someone maybe has said to me that, you know, well, it's been my job, my career, or what was my career, and now I don't even have a career, and now my career seems to be like virtual learning for my kids at home, and I'm not trained to do that, and I don't even want to do that, you know, it's like there's all these new realities. And I've been thinking about how to respond because there's that scenario, there's dealing with pain and loss, and there's all these conversations that people are having, and I hope that you could have some of these conversations too. But maybe when you're having them, it's good to think of how you're going to respond before you ask that question, what's the most disappointing thing? Because there's a couple ways you could respond. You could respond with giving this person more information, right? I mean, I could tell someone, hey, you've lost your job. Well, let me help you get your resume going, and let me see if I've got some contacts. Let me give you some information. You could respond to someone with telling them what to do. I mean, I'm a pastor, right? I mean, I could tell you, like, here's what you need to pray. Here's what you need to read in the Bible. And I've sort of stopped short at that because I think I learned a long time ago that people really don't care how much you know, and they really don't care how much you've done, but people will never forget how you make them feel. And I think we have an opportunity, especially as Christians, to enter into how people are feeling and to be someone that actually gives them hope, to actually tell them a light can dawn in your life, a light can come, and to make a person actually feel hopeful can really change where they're at. I was flying this past week and on a plane, and first time I'd been on a plane since the pandemic, and you know, now there's this whole new world of like trying to really be in your own bubble on an airplane, and so we're not even like off the ground yet. We're still on the runway, and I've got sanitizers, and I'm wiping down my area where my laptop's going to go, and my tray, and my armrest, and my headrest, and got my mask, you know, super tight, and there's no one sitting next to me. There's 2 seats next to me, and I'm like, this is a full flight. Like, this is great. The door's just about to close, and just before the door closed, this couple came running down the aisle, and of course, they had the 2 seats, husband and wife, right next to me. I was on the aisle, they were in the middle and the window row, and they were wonderful people. We had really great conversation. But if you know anything about me, I kind of get on a plane and I sort of have like this mindset of like, all right, I'm going to be in my bubble, a little me time, I'm going to get some work done. I had some writing I was going to do. I had some reading I was looking forward to. I was going to just really like be in the zone for like 3.5, 4 hours. And we started having this conversation, this couple and I, and learning everything about them. I mean, everything, like where they're from and where they're going, and it's really wonderful. And I'm like, all right, just, you know, be relaxed, Ron, and I'm just kind of taking it all in. But inside, I'm like, but I got work to do. I got important stuff to do. And having this conversation, and then almost comically, it seemed like this lady sitting next to me kept dropping things. Like, she dropped her pen, and it, of course, was underneath my feet, and I grabbed it. And then she dropped her phone, and it's underneath my feet, and I grab it. And even at one point, she took her husband's coffee cup and trash, and she leaned over my laptop with a cup of coffee, mind you, over my laptop, and dropped it in the waste paper basket of the stewardess. But the paper fell out, and it went all over my laptop. And every time this happened, she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm just so busy. I'm just so stressed. I'm trying to get back to work. And I'm like, I'm trying to get back to work too, you know, and having this conversation. And then probably 2 hours in, her AirPod falls out of her ear. Tiniest little thing, right? Out of her ear, and it hits my shoulder, and it goes between the seats on the airplane. And it's pitch black, and she's frantic because they're really little. And I'm like, no, don't worry, I'll get that for you. And unbuckle and look underneath the seat and look underneath the other seat, and I can't find it. And so I get my flashlight out on my phone, and there it is. It's underneath the row behind me, underneath a guy who is sleeping, underneath his feet that are crossed. And so now I got to be like MacGyver and kind of like reach under, grab the AirPod, wipe it off, and give it back to her. And again, she's like, I'm so sorry. I feel really bad. I feel so bad. And I'm like, it's okay. Everything's going to be fine. It's really no big deal. And even if it wasn't in the moment, I got off that plane, and I later thought about that whole interaction. And I thought, man, I'm so glad that I didn't blow it in that moment. Because I know that if that were me, I would sure have appreciated it if someone would have shown me that level of grace, if someone would have showed me that level of patience, if someone would have showed my wife or my kids. See, this is what's different about being a follower of Jesus, is we can live with this hope, and we can extend this hope even to people who are feeling so frantic and so frustrated around us. This is our opportunity. Isaiah kind of wraps up his message sort of with this. He says this in verse 4. He says, "For in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressors. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire." And then here's the part you probably know. "For to us a child is born, and to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end." See, Isaiah gives this imagery of battle. Like Midian's going to get defeated, and all of your blood-stained warrior garments, you're not going to need them anymore. You could just throw them in the fire, because there's a day is coming when this child will be born, and he will be so amazing. That's why he gives him these incredible names of Wonderful Counselor and Mighty God and Everlasting Father and Prince of Peace. There will be someone coming who's come to give you a whole different way of life. The thing I love about Christmas is not only is it true, but it's an opportunity to step into this reality, this gift that has been given. But this gift doesn't mean anything if you don't receive it. And so the last thought on hope is it's a gift to receive. "For to us this child is born, to us a son is given." You think about gifts and giving gifts, and this is the one time when it really is better to receive a gift than even to give a gift. And some gifts, I'll be honest, they're hard to receive, right? Like, have you received the nose hair trimmers yet? Or, just gifts that aren't really that fun to receive. Maybe someone gives you a gift and you open it up and it's a book, and it's a diet book. And you're like, gee, thanks for the dieting tips, right? And then you open the next gift and it's another book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And you look at your two books, you're like, great, I need to lose a few pounds and I have no friends. Thank you very much. I appreciate the gifts, right? You need to know the gift of Christmas, this child that has been born, doesn't come with any subliminal message. There's no mixed motive. It's simply a gift to receive this gift of Jesus that comes to give us life and life to the full, and to reveal our need without him. I want to invite the worship team to come up. And as Justin said, we're going to celebrate communion this morning. And so as the team is joining us on stage, I just want to give a simple reminder. Hopefully you grabbed your communion elements on the way in. I'm going to pray, and the team is going to lead you here in some opportunities to reflect. And as you do that, you're welcome to take the elements, the bread, which represents the body of Jesus, and the juice, which represents his blood, which has been poured out in the forgiveness of all of your sins. And you can take that as we're singing whenever you're ready. And then we would just ask that you join us in singing along with us. Let's celebrate this gift of Jesus. So I want to just ask you to simply take a moment to bow your head and to close your eyes, and I want to pray with you. And as you close your eyes this morning, I want to ask you to do something a little different. I want you just to simply take a really deep breath, to just breathe in and allow this gift of life to really, really settle into you. Father God, as we pray in this moment, we simply acknowledge that you are this wonderful counselor, that you are a mighty God, that you are an everlasting Father, and you are the Prince of all peace. And God, I pray that this morning those would be more than just words or titles, but that would become a reality for us as we leave here today. That we would cling to the hope that only you provide. Jesus, what you provide on the cross as a substitution for our sin is complete forgiveness. And what you offer is exclusive. We get it nowhere else. And it requires that we give you all of ourselves, that we give you all of our life in response. And that really is this moment of communion. We take in what you've offered in the life and death and resurrection of your son, Jesus. I just want to pray in this moment for anyone here, for this moment. I believe that there are some of you here now that need to make a decision with your life to cross the line of faith and to walk in intimacy with God. And you can begin to do that today, and you can celebrate this communion meal with us by simply accepting Jesus. Make this your prayer this morning. Just simply say, Jesus, I give you my life. Make that your prayer. Just whisper that to him this morning. Jesus, I give you my life. In exchange, you give me life here and forever into my future. That's the gift of Jesus and the gift of Christmas. God, we take these elements with grateful hearts and we sing to you out of all that you've done. It's in your name we pray.